is simply an activity which one engages. Sadly enough, it often becomes little more than a way of passing time. Be prepared for a lifelong contest between vocation and occupation. It will be present not only in your professional, workday pursuits, but in your other activities as well, in your civic work and in your life as a spouse and parent. In all those things, avoid the mediocre course of merely passing the time. Look upon your role in the family as being a bit of a calling, a true vocation, as your role in your chosen profession. You can never become a true leader in medicine, or for that matter, law or religion or education, if you are a fraud in your own home. These are some of the considerations for the years ahead of you. And yes, I assure you there is life after graduation. I'm sure you're all delighted to hear that. But I can add that life is going to continue to be every bit as mysterious after graduation as it has been for you up to now before graduation. It's every bit as challenging and rewarding, frustrating and stunning, and every bit as precious. However, from today on, you have the right and the responsibility, and you must also have the commitment to be its guardian. Try to understand life. Please do that. Enjoy it. Naturally try to do that. And defend it. You must absolutely do that because it needs defending. And beginning this day, your society has thrust you into a leadership role which you can never draw back from. You're very fortunate here at Kcom to have been trained in the tradition of Andrew Taylor Still. Dr. Still, very much a man of his times, was horrified by what he saw in the chaos of the Civil War and the medical horrors of the battlefield surgery tents. He was frustrated by the ravages of infectious disease and the personal loss of family members. He was also committed to righting the social ills of the day, slavery and the lack of women's rights. You, as osteopathic graduates, are equally men and women of your time. You will soon see, all too soon, in your internship and residency training, the silent horror of AIDS, as I have seen in the halls of San Francisco General Hospital. You will be frustrated by your inability to cure or prevent it. You will also see other social ills of this age: sexual promiscuity, intravenous drug abuse, unnecessary infant mortality, poverty, and avoidable illness. Some of you who are undergraduate history majors may take issue with me, but I happen to think there's never been a time in human history where so many real, living human beings and the concept of life itself has been under such threatening pressures as they are today. Every evening, the television news reports to us in full color the level of homicide that mankind has achieved in the previous 24 hours, and it is awesome. We are given the numbers of dead and wounded for that day in the Middle East and in Central America. We are hounded, we are haunted by this barbaric arithmetic, this Dow Jones report of the absence of mercy, this daily inexorable computation of man's inhumanity to man, his capacity for dismissing and extinguishing life. Did I leave out North America in my remarks? I shouldn't have, because right here on this continent, in Missouri, even in Kirksville, we have our daily body counts. As a nation, the United States has an average of more than 50 homicides a day. That's about 10 times the homicide rate of other modern industrialized nations of this world. Is there life after graduation? For many Americans, the answer is unaccountably and disastrously no. Homicide is rather sensational, but let's not talk about it. Let's talk instead about more mundane events with even higher statistics. Driving the family car, for example. Americans have turned this innocent pursuit into one of the deadliest activities in our society. We're killing twice as many people in highway accidents as are killed in flat-out homicides. And the majority of these lives are lost young lives. Why do we do that? And smoking. You wouldn't expect a presentation from the Office of Surgeon General without talking about smoking. But how can I avoid that when you know that this year, as well as I do, that between 300 and 400,000 people will die before their time because of a disease condition aggravated by or actually caused by their habit of smoking cigarettes? then why do some 52 million people still smoke? Why do they endanger their own lives as well as the lives of others? Their friends, their husbands or wives, their co-workers, their own children. Why do they do that? I don't know the whole answer. I'd like to think that I know some of the parts of the answer, and I have a few suspicions about the other parts, but that's the best I can do. Another issue, by 1991, over 250,000 Americans will have full-blown AIDS. Over half of them will have died, and the other doomed to the same fate. Our only hope in the foreseeable future, like with cigarettes, is change in human behavior, in this instance with regard to sexual behavior and the use of illegal intravenous drugs. Many of the things I've mentioned to you are societal problems, and you as individuals have limited opportunities to impact on them. You will, of course, as physicians, deal with the consequences. Trauma presenting in the emergency room, lung cancer, and AIDS in the hospitals, just as a few examples. Clearly, you will use your technical skills to treat them, but how about your role in prevention? As osteopathic physicians, you have a tradition of holistic, non-invasive treatment, and you can and must lead others to the still unrealized potential of preventive medicine. In an old movie that you may have seen on television called The Graduate, the one advice given to Dustin Hoffman by a well-meaning person for the future was plastics. Well, my one word of advice to you is prevention. It's critical that you as individual practitioners and members of American society it is critical for you as individual practitioners and as members of American society to promote prevention. It may also be the key to the future of osteopathic medicine. And make no mistake about that, your generation is the pivotal one in the future of osteopathy. Don't let it be decided by default. Osteopathic medicine must soon decide its place in medicine and fight to establish and hold it, or be swept away, and we will all be poorer for it. Please be active in the American Osteopathic Association and the Kcom Alumni Association. And by that admonition, I don't mean active in the sense of your contribution of your dollars. I mean contribution of yourself. You are the important resource to the AOA and to the Kcom Alumni Society. Let me say one thing about the issue that is probably nearest and dearest to my heart, and that's rural health. Despite the, quote, common knowledge that there is a surplus of physicians, rural America still does not have its fair share. Rural hospitals are in serious trouble. Long-term care facilities for rural areas are almost non-existent. Kcom has been a model of rural healthcare system building in North Central America. I hope that among you there are those who would follow the leadership of President Tenning and Dean Jacobs and the tradition of Andrew Taylor Still, and bring that rural healthcare system building to the rest of rural America and to the benefit of this nation. Another issue of great concern to me is the question of our aging society. And I ask you to please let us affirm the life of the elderly person, the man or woman with a past full of contributions, a presence of little more than observation, and a future of nothing but rest. However, much life is left for that person to live. Please let us not be unconcerned or indifferent. Let us affirm that. And for the tiniest among us, someone with no past who is all future, the newborn child with no debts and no way to say thank you, let's affirm life for that person too. Regardless of his or her social or physical condition, let us affirm all the life to which every child is entitled. Let's not be indifferent to the lives of our children, any of them. And let me add also here a note of a group of people for whom I know that the men and women of Kcom have a special interest and sense of service for, and that is the handicapped. Today, about 1 in every 7 Americans is handicapped or limited in some way from living a life that is normal for his or her age group. That's something like 35 million Americans. Life is precious to these people, but many times it is precious and satisfying and productive in spite of the attitudes of society, attitudes that are barriers to acceptance and fairness. Each of you can change these attitudes in society so that the handicapped may enjoy the quality of life they deserve. This also is a vocation for you, a divine calling, to care for and about those men and women who, for one reason or another, cannot fully care for themselves. John Ruskin said, "There is no wealth but life." I believe we can build treasures for the handicapped by making sure all the living they do will be quality living. Now, I suppose on this commencement day that you're hoping I'll pass on a few marvelous tips on how to get rich and famous by working from 10 to 4 with 2 hours off for lunch. I wish I could, but honestly, you don't really need tips. I'm not worried about you. Despite all the alleged adversity, you've made it at least to this important day. And we would all agree that for the last 4 long years that KCOM simply did not understand you. But as luck would have it, you managed to achieve a marvelous education anyway. And your parents have been wrong about almost everything. We all know that. But they've also been very supportive, and given the circumstances, they've been unbelievably kind. And some of your classmates have turned out to be as smart as you, and they once thought they were. And they have become such an important part of your life, and many of them will be important for the rest of your life. And I think all of us who've been involved in graduate education know how important spouses are. Their emotional support, in many cases financial support, certainly papers that had to be done the next day. Be sure to think in your mind that this is every bit as much their day as it is your day. So all in all, I think you can look back on a wonderful few years. But today is the day of triumph, and I believe you and your families are more than ready for it. So let me close my message this morning with a sentence out of the essays of Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the great sages of New England. Emerson wrote simply, "There is properly no history, only biography." And I agree with him. The real story of this world is the aggregated life stories of every man and every woman who ever lived. Today, each one of you will complete an important chapter in your own personal biographies and become forever part of the rich fabric of osteopathy and proud alumni of the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine. I wish for each of you all the very best for the future, and that you will complete more and more fine chapters highlighted by impressive and satisfying experiences such as the one today. For after all, your biographies will be our history. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samuels, for your challenge and your message. We appreciate your coming to Kirksville and talking with our graduates. Welcome back. Professor Crummy, Dr. Tinning. Right here. In 1949, Presley L. Crummy, Ph.D., joined the faculty of the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine, then known as the Kirksville College of Osteopathy and Surgery. He was an associate professor. He was promoted to professor of anatomy in 1959, and with his retirement was named emeritus professor of anatomy in 1977. Dr. Crummy has continued to teach in the Gross Anatomy Laboratory through the current academic year. For 38 years, Dr. Crummy has faithfully served KCOM. His teaching of histology and human gross anatomy have allowed generations of students to benefit